Welcome to our deep dive into the world of paranormal and supernatural events, where reality often feels stranger than fiction. In today's video, we'll explore eerie tales of unexplained phenomena, from ghostly hauntings to mysterious disappearances that defy logic. Prepare to be captivated by stories that blur the lines between the known and the unknown. In every story of things that go bump in the night, there are two possibilities. One, it's all just a hoax, a product of overactive imaginations or clever trickery. Two, there's something far beyond the grasp of the human mind, something incomprehensible. But what if, in the case of the Enfield Haunting, the second option was the horrifying truth? This is a story that has haunted minds for decades, forcing the world to confront the possibility that the supernatural might not just be real, but far more sinister than we ever imagined. It all began in 1977, in a small council house in Enfield, North London, with a seemingly innocent game, a Ouija board. This game would lead to something far more terrifying than the Hodgson family could have ever predicted. The Hodgson family, single mother Peggy and her 4 children, 13-year-old Margaret, 10-year-old Johnny, 7-year-old Billy, and 11-year-old Janet, lived in what seemed like an ordinary home in an ordinary neighborhood. But soon, their house transformed into a place of unimaginable horror. It started small, strange noises at first, random knocks, scrapes, sounds easily dismissed as the house settling. But over time, the knocks grew louder, more distinct, more consistent. They came from places that shouldn't make sounds, as though something was following them from room to room. Then, things escalated. One night, Peggy heard loud banging from upstairs. She rushed to investigate but found nothing. Janet claimed that Billy's bed was moving on its own. At first, Peggy thought it was just a prank, but then she saw it. The chest of drawers in the children's room, heavy and solid, began sliding across the floor as if pushed by an unseen force. Peggy pushed it back, but it moved again. And again. Something was holding it in place, something unnatural. Terrified, Peggy grabbed her children and fled to their neighbour's house, but the terror was far from over. Vic Nottingham, a contractor and neighbour, came to investigate. He couldn't find any structural damage, yet he began hearing the same knocking sounds. They seemed to follow him, echoing through the house. It was clear, this wasn't just the house settling. Something far more sinister was at work. Desperate, Peggy called the police. 2 officers arrived and were immediately struck by the same sounds. But the real shock came when a chair sitting still suddenly began to wobble and slide across the floor toward one of the officers. There were no wires, no tricks, just an impossibility. Word of the strange occurrences spread, and soon the press got involved. Reporters from the Daily Mirror came to investigate. At first, nothing happened, until the Hodgsons returned. Then, toys, Legos, marbles, began flying across the room as though hurled by an invisible hand. The reporters were hit by flying objects, and they too became witnesses to the supernatural. As the haunting grew more violent, the Society for Psychical Research, SPR, took an interest. They sent their top investigator, Maurice Gross, who had recently lost his own daughter named Janet. Driven by grief, he became deeply involved with the family. It became clear, whatever was haunting the Hodgsons was fixated on Janet. She became the focus of the supernatural activity. Janet's bed would shake violently at night. She spoke in guttural voices that weren't her own. Her body contorted in unnatural ways. Objects levitated around her, moving as if guided by an invisible hand. The paranormal activity only intensified. Dark shapes flickered in the corners of the room, always watching, always waiting. The sounds, those relentless, terrifying knocks, never stopped. Things grew even darker when Janet began to show signs of possession. Her behaviour became erratic, and objects would levitate around her. The investigators couldn't explain it. Was it psychological, mass hysteria, or was something far darker at play? As the investigation continued, even the most experienced experts were shaken. The attacks on Janet grew more violent, more terrifying. The family's lives were consumed by fear, unable to escape the malevolent force that haunted them. Eventually, the haunting came to an end, but the scars it left would last a lifetime. The Enfield Haunting became one of the most well-documented and terrifying poltergeist cases in history. It serves as a chilling reminder that some doors, once opened, can never be closed. Some things never go away. So, what really happened in Enfield? Was it a hoax, or did something truly malevolent cross into our world that night? One thing is certain. The Enfield Haunting will forever be one of the darkest chapters in the history of the paranormal. The Demon of Brownsville Road, a horrifying paranormal tale. It begins in the 1980s, when Bobby Kerr, a man with a strange fascination for an old Victorian house in Pittsburgh, found himself drawn to it for reasons he couldn't explain. Bobby had been captivated by the house on Brownsville Road ever since he was a child, and when it finally came up for sale, he jumped at the chance. It was the perfect home for his growing family. But when Bobby made his offer on the house, he was surprised, and somewhat relieved, to find that the owners accepted without negotiation. No haggling. It seemed too good to be true. It would be a new chapter for Bobby, his wife Lisa, and their 4 children. Yet from the moment they first stepped inside, something was off. The air was thick with an unexplained chill. Strange noises echoed from empty rooms, and then something happened that none of them would ever forget. Bobby's young son, Bobby Jr., wandered away from his parents as they were measuring the rooms. Later, he was found by the stairs, his eyes wide with fear, hyperventilating and trembling, as if he'd just seen something unimaginable. He couldn't explain it, but he was terrified of something invisible, something that he could not escape. When Bob asked the previous owners if there was anything wrong with the house, they dismissed his concerns. They assured him everything was fine, even mentioning that Catholic Mass had been held in the living room several times over the years. A strange response, considering the history of the house. But over the next few months, things would take a darker turn. The lights in the house flickered on and off by themselves, doors slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls, and most unsettling of all, the old coat closet light. It refused to stay still. The pull chain would wrap itself around and around, no matter how many times it was fixed. It was as if something was toying with them. For Bobby Jr., the terror was personal. He refused to sleep in his room and began hiding in the closet, insisting the lights stay on. Something was watching him, and it wasn't friendly. But it wasn't just the lights or the doors. No, the presence in that house was far more sinister. Sometimes it appeared as a black, foggy cloud, suffocating the air with a sense of dread. Other times, a foul stench filled the rooms, a mixture of decay and something far more unholy. Crucifixes were found bent and twisted, rosaries were broken, and strange symbols appeared on the walls. It became clear. The house was being haunted by something much darker than a simple ghost. One day, while digging in the yard, Bob discovered something that would change everything. Buried beneath the ground was a small metal box. Inside were religious items, symbols of faith twisted and destroyed. The discovery sent chills down Bob's spine. Disturbed by the find, Bob reached out to the previous owners, hoping for answers. Their response? A cold, blunt warning. Put it back where you found it. What had the previous owners known that they weren't saying? As the months went on, the paranormal activity escalated. The family became increasingly torn apart by the malevolent force in their home. Lisa, Bobby's wife, became plagued by nightmares, her mental state deteriorating. The children began to act out, and Bobby himself found his once stable life unraveling. In 2003, things came to a head when Bob's son, Bobby Jr., lashed out violently, attacking his father. Bob was arrested, though no charges were filed. It was the final straw for the family. Desperate for help, Bob reached out to the Catholic Church. Several priests, along with a layperson, began the long and difficult battle to rid the house of its demonic presence. For years they fought to free the family from the grip of whatever evil had claimed their home. The battle raged on for 2 long years, with each failed exorcism only strengthening the entity that haunted Brownsville Road. The spirits or demons, that resided in that house were unlike anything the priests had ever encountered. In 2014, Bob Kerr published his memoir, The Demon of Brownsville Road, detailing the horrors his family endured. The book brought media attention, and Bob's credibility as a public figure lent weight to his story. But not everyone believed it. Family members of the previous owners, who Bob had mentioned in the book under pseudonyms, came forward to denounce the story. They claimed Bob had fabricated the events, tarnishing the memory of their loved ones. But the horrors didn't end with the book. In 2015, Bob's life would take another tragic turn. His son David passed away suddenly, and his wife Lisa spiraled into a deep depression. Their marriage ended after 37 years. Today, the house still stands. Despite the nightmares, despite the tragedy, Bobby Kerr has opened the house as a bed and breakfast, hoping to bring in guests and make a living off of the house's dark history. But the question remains, is it safe to stay there? Many have asked. Some have even ventured into the house, seeking to experience its dark energy for themselves. But the question lingers. What happens to those who stay in the house on Brownsville Road?